The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, wherever you might be in this world. Welcome to the Virtualization Virtual Chapter meeting this month. Actually, it's the one carried over from last month. I apologize. My GMT scheduling was screwed up somehow, and so but we got it right this time. So we appreciate you being here today. We do have Paul Stanton with us, and to talk about containers and SSRS. Before we get there, we'll just go over some quick community news about PASS. Let's see if I can get, there we go. We want to welcome our new board members, Lori Edwards, Jennifer Mosier, and Roberto Vanesca to the board. If you happen to miss PASS Summit, definitely would suggest you start looking at it in January. The pre-registration for 2019 will start then. That is when it is the cheapest all year long. So definitely go out there and register. It is a great time. You learn a lot. You get to network, and some great folks, some great presentations that we had this year. PASS Marathon is coming up, the developer edition. So if you want to learn more, a lot of all-day free training. So go ahead and register, and you can get more information there, even more free online training. The virtual groups, upcoming meetings, these are all happening today or happened yesterday. You can probably go get the recordings and stuff, but there's some tomorrow and kind of going forward. Lots and lots of free training that you're available to get. So just take a look out there, and you can go and learn more there. And then, of course, here's all the different virtualization groups. You could sign up for any of them, and you'll get an email, kind of like you do from me when we do have the presentations live, and then also emails about when the recordings are there available for you up on YouTube. Upcoming SQL Saturdays, this weekend is DC and Nashville, and then we got Slovenia and Prague over in Europe, and Lima has already passed down in South America. So PASS is looking for new sponsors. If you want to refer someone and they become a sponsor, you're eligible for a gift card from PASS to help fund our training and stuff that we do. And then, of course, you can become a member, and I think you already should be a member based upon your coming to this group. So, and just talks about all the different free resources you have. And then there's all the different ways you can actually contact PASS. So at this point, I'll turn this presentation over to Paul. We definitely want to thank Paul for coming out today. And one moment, and we'll have him up here.
Hey, thank you, Tom.
Okay, and I do see your screen, so you're good to go.
Okay, very good. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm coming to you from Las Vegas at the Gartner Cloud and Infrastructure Conference, and I'm happy to be with you because that gives me an opportunity to take a break from the conference, frankly. And the topic today is going to be SQL Server containers with SQL Server report server support. Many of you have probably followed the development of Docker SQL containers. Of course, they come to us from both Microsoft as well as my firm, Windox. And SSRS and other SQL Server services have been in often requested, but have not been supported in SQL Server containers until now. Just a brief bit of history. Windox released our Docker port of Docker to Windows back in 2016. We supported Windows Server 2012 R2 and Server 2016 with .NET, as well as all editions of SQL Server 2008 onward. we came to the realization fairly quickly, and of course our customers were educating us along the way, that a fast delivery of a container, and a container in this context is nothing more than a named instance on a host. If you can't deliver the data along with the container, what's the point? It becomes fairly academic. So in 2017, we added Windows virtual hard drive based database cloning, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. And then earlier this year, we added database cloning support from any storage array. It could be Pure Storage or NetApp or EMC or any number of other storage systems. And we deliver volume-based snapshots off of those. And we expanded the delivery of the database clones now to include Microsoft's SQL containers and conventional instances. So we can take a database source from virtually any source environment. It could be backups or it could be a storage array, but we deliver those clone database environments to any SQL Server target environment. And of course, the topic of this session today is the new SSRS support that we include in our SQL Server containers. And we also added a user and group level authentication for the service as well. The object is to deliver read-write supporting SQL databases anywhere from a few gigabytes in size up to 50 terabytes in size to any SQL Server environment of your choice. To do that in a matter of seconds, and to do it with literally no storage impact. We just delivered a solution for a large financial service organization that delivers 25 terabyte SQL Server data warehouses in about 40 seconds. And that's happening off of a storage array. So literally a 1.2 petabyte of SQL Server data online and available on demand in seconds. And we're going to be talking today about the architecture that involves the following components. There's going to be a immutable image. That's part of the Docker design. One of the unique aspects of what we're going to be talking about today is how Windocs puts the data into an image, and the data becomes a first-class Docker artifact. And that yields many benefits. The data then has a lot of attached metadata, so it really improves data governance, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. So there are immutable images. There are the database clones. Those are the read-write environments that can either be attached to containers, as we're going to be focusing on today, but the clones can also be delivered and mounted to the SQL Server instances on the LAN or Microsoft SQL Server containers, which may be on a host on the LAN as well. Windocs runs on any public cloud or any on-premise infrastructure and delivers the components as you see on this slide. It's a great complement, we believe, for both SQL Azure, where there is no SSRS support, but also AWS RDS, where again, there is no report server support. Some free resources that you guys can avail yourselves to after this session. There is a free Windocs Community Edition. This includes the SSRS support that we're going to demo today. It's available on our website. It's a simple registration, and you'll get the links to download it. There's also a Getting Started doc along with a whole host of other docs of how you can work with these container environments. We support containers in third-party external key managers with TDE, and we support column-level encryption, a whole host of configurations. Now, the SSRS support that we are going to talk about today is for native mode only, and scale out and Power BI integration are not currently supported, although the solution that I'm going to demo provides a very effective method for scaling out support for large user groups, because you can simply replicate containers on demand. The support for SSRS is available for SQL 2008 through 2016. The work to support SQL 2017 is coming. The registry support for SSRS in 2017 was changed by Microsoft, so that's a bit of an incremental work for us to bring that on. I'm going to talk just a minute here to talk about database clones, because database clones, the data environments that you want to deliver with a container, are a critical part of the story. Now, Windows includes Windows virtual hard drives, VHD. The Windows VHD is a foundational technology that is used to support Hyper-V VMs. In the same fashion that VMs are served up using a source image, we're simply applying VHDs to provide a source image for database environments. So in the case of a VHD, the way we will build a data image today is we'll take backups from a production environment. We'll restore those backups to a VHD. The VHD will be mounted to a container and ultimately produced and then saved as part of an immutable image. Once that parent VHD is created, the clones, or what are also called differencing disks, can be served off of that in a matter of seconds. The clones support both read-write operations, but they use the parent image for read access. Data is copied down to the clones on any kind of change or write to that environment. And as I've explained, and as we'll see today, you can serve these clones to any SQL Server environment. SQL Server containers, both Windows and Microsoft's, as well as conventional instances. I just wanted to pause here for a second. Are there any questions at this point that we should address?
Yeah, there's one, Paul. Can SSRS be deployed on SQL 2017 Express in a container or a virtual machine?
When we have 2017 support, yes. It supports SQL Express along with all the other additions. So as I mentioned earlier, our current SSRS support is tops out at SQL 2016. 2017 will probably happen in January, is my guess.
Okay, that's all the questions right now, Paul.
All right. So let's take just a minute. I want to explain the workflow of how this Docker-based design delivers database clones with containers, and how SSRS is delivered as well. So we've got three boxes here. On the left is the Windows server running the Windows daemon or service. On the right is your client. It could be, let's think of it as a Windows laptop or desktop. And on the upper right is a file share on the network. The process begins with a Docker file. Pretty established best practice in the marketplace today is to deliver configurations in the form of a file. And the Docker file that you see here implements is called by a Docker command, docker build -t. We are naming the image that we're going to build clone, and then we have a file path to the Docker file that's going to be built. The Docker file then is presented below, including, includes the statement from MS SQL 2016. That's your base target image, your SQL Server environment. And then we're building an image that includes two full backups, setup cloning full for the sales backup and for the ops backup. And you can see that the configuration file includes the file path to where those backups are located. And it's on the test machine in the DB backups folder. And then finally, we copy and run SQL scripts during the image build. In this case, this would be likely a data masking script. We'll copy that to the engine and run it when the backups have been restored. and that's likely implementing a data masking script. We also have support for other scripts that are run when the containers are provisioned to set, for example, user logins on the container. Now, that context of that Docker file sent to the Windocs service, the container engine, if you will, and it is processed in a serial fashion. It begins by saying, well, I've got to build a SQL 2016 container. It then sees that, oh, I've got to build a VHD to support the database clone. And it sees that the database backups are located on the test in the DB backups folder. And so the VHD is going to get built where the backups are located. And that VHD then is going to be mounted to the SQL container. And then the backups are restored to it. When the backups are completed, the restores are completed, then the scripts are run. The VHD then is unmounted and saved as part of the image. And that is the complete life cycle on building a complex image. These images can support up to 50 backups or more. There's really no limit to the number of databases that can be included in an image. As I mentioned, the image can include scripts that are run when the image is built, but also scripts that can be applied to the runtime environments when the containers are provisioned. And once the image is built, then the way in which you provision containers from an image is a simple command, docker run -d. Again, you reference the image name. In this case, it's clone. That command gets sent to the container engine. It immediately just does a lookup on, well, what is the clone image, what's involved in it, and it then provisions it. In this case, that's going to involve producing a clone or a differencing disk off of the parent VHD. It's going to be located in the same location as the parent VHD. That then is going to be mounted to the SQL Server container in this case. It could be mounted to a SQL instance. Any runtime scripts are then applied, and the subsequent details are then returned to the client. The details include a container ID, the port at which the container is running, and if you configure it, it will return, a SQL SA passwords if you choose. That's optional, depending on what you want to do. And that is the way in which this thing works. So let's switch gears here now. And Tom, I'm switching over to an actual instance. So can you still see my screen okay?
Yep, can still see it.
Okay. Any questions at this point?
Yeah, we got one more question. It says, how much delay is there between data changes in production and to the clones getting updated? For example, an email report of an invoice for an order just submitted on a website.
Yeah, that's a great question. The frequency that the images are updated, as I just described, the images are built using a configuration file. Now, and those configuration files are typically using full and differential backups. So it's certainly possible to automate the building of the images. And the frequency of the image updates will be driven by the frequency of the availability of the backup updates. In practice, most people are updating images daily. Some update images weekly. There is interest in automating this process so the images can be updated very frequently. We have customers that do the same process as I'm describing using storage arrays. And with storage arrays, it's fairly common to do much more frequent snapshot updates. In that case, you can be updating images as frequently as every 15 or 20 minutes, I mean, if you really wanted to. So you can have very, very up-to-date images available in that scenario. With backups, frankly, it's going to be less practical to do that. The one big difference between the storage arrays and the VHD-based images is the VHDs take time to build. You know, if you're working with a large database environment, the restores of the backups to build those images can take, you know, a matter of hours. And that is why many people will typically update images daily, and they'll typically do the VHD builds during the night.
Okay, that's all the questions for now.
Okay, very good. So here we're looking at, this is a Docker-based database cloning solution. This happens to be a web UI that we built to respond to the customer's needs for a easier to use environment for most users. You can see that we've got a number of images up on top here. And interestingly, if you think about what these images are, given that we're putting the databases into these images and that the images are immutable, they cannot be changed once they're built, this ends up being a authoritative, secure data catalog that is very easily produced within an organization. If you think about some of the data governance issues that are a challenge today, this becomes an attractive solution for many organizations to get control over what data they want to publish and make available within an organization. This is also a tooling that is really easy to use for any DBA and really allows the DBAs to take control of publishing of data to various users and groups. Even when a storage array is involved, there really doesn't need to be any interaction between the DBA and the user community and the storage admin, because this process has virtually no impact on the storage array because you're using clones of volumes that really don't have any storage consumption involved. So you've got your images on top, and then down below you can see we've got a number of environments that have been delivered. And there's also the ability to create an image that's also presented. Now this is a web UI. The traditional Docker command line client is also here, so you can see I've got the ability to get a list of the images with Docker images. You can see I also can get a listing of the environments that are currently in place. Each environment has what's called a container ID. There's always going to be an image associated with each container. There's always going to be a state of the container. It's either going to be running or stopped. And it's always going to have a port at which it's accessed. If I wanted to create a new container using a command line, it's easy to do. I can simply do a Docker create and name an image, and it will come back to me in just a few seconds with, here's the full container ID, and the port at which it's running. At this point, I can also start it. I can start it using just a couple of the initial digits of the ID, and now it's running. And if I repeat the Docker PS, you can see that I've got a new .NET with IIS container. Well, we've got, this is a point update that we were just testing yesterday, and you can see it's not started, but yeah, it's a bug that is being fixed. But so you've got this Docker command line interface, and you also have the web UI. Now, I've got an image that I've already built, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how users would interact with this. Now, this image I've got includes 4 different databases, and the SSRS support is specific to the Windows SQL Server containers. Now, the SSRS support is one thing that's new for us is the SSRS and the database engine are running as a Windows service in a container. Up until now, and this is true for Microsoft's containers as well, the database engine is the only thing that's been available in a container. And it has also run as a SQL process on the host, not as a full-fledged Windows service. We're kind of going down the path to deliver containers that run as a Windows service so that we can deliver a full range of the SQL Server services, so along with SQL Agent, the SSRS, and other services. So we've got this image, we've got 4 databases. I'm going to go ahead and leave this blank. If I select one or more of the databases, I'll get just those databases in the container. And so let's go ahead and kick that off. And while that's running, let's take a look at what the Docker file is that we're delivering on. So this is the form that the Docker file takes. You can see that we're working with an image that includes the SSRS support MS SQL report. In this case, it's the 2014 edition. We could be doing it with 2016 or 2012 or 2008 as well. And we have the backups are local to this host, the 4 backups that we're delivering in the background, and then we have a copy and run command on a data masking script. And so this is the image that we're currently provisioning a container from. Now, I also want to show you the configuration options available for Windocs. This is we're taking a look at this in the form of a notepad, but this is a simple configuration file that's included in every Windocs install. And you can see what we're doing is we're simply identifying the instance on the host that we're using to clone to deliver a container. And this is an important point that I want you to understand. If you take a look at Microsoft SQL containers and Docker containers in general, they pull images from a public repo, a repository of images. Pulling those from the public repo often is kind of painful because the Microsoft images are average some 10 gigabytes in size. What we do is quite a bit different. We actually clone a locally installed SQL Server instance. Now, there are many advantages in this approach. One is, our container is nothing more than a SQL runtime environment. So it's quick, it's efficient. You can, what you're getting when you clone a locally installed instance because you have complete control over what its configuration may be. And it also has licensing benefits because under Microsoft SQL Server licensing, you can have as many named instances as you choose with a locally installed instance. So in our case, the SSRS containers are essentially free under a licensed install. Now, a couple of other things. You can see that we have an option down here to run the reporting containers using a particular username. And you can see that we also can encrypt the password. So you have complete control over who's running the SSRS containers. Another option is the ability to run Windocs as a SQL Server container-only service. We have a lot of customers in financial services. They like the ability to really lock the Windocs service down by running just as a SQL Server sandbox configuration. We are preventing people from working with .NET containers, for example, or using a broader range of Docker commands. It is technically feasible to build a malicious executable and put it into a container and then execute it on the host. If you want to completely prevent that type of activity, you can just say, well, I'm going to only use SQL Server containers and we'll rely on the SQL Server job object isolation for security. I also have support for using encrypted passwords for various operations and other things. So let's go back here and take a look. Our container's been delivered. Let's go ahead and get that started. And then we'll access it. Now, when it comes time to access an environment, this just happens to be an instance I've already got running on this host. You can access, what port were we at? We're at port 10,007. Oh, that's not going to work. We need to access the so accessing on the database engine, we use the loopback address and the port. And you can see that the full complement of databases were delivered. So now let's access the report server. And that is going to be the report server is accessed with the machine name and instance name in this case. Now you'll notice that we also can use Windows authentication here. That's another aspect of the benefit. I was talking earlier about Windocs. One of the benefits of cloning a locally installed instance is that Windocs is fully compatible with all your existing infrastructure, and that includes Active Directory and Windows authentication. Very important point, because that's one of the problems that Microsoft has had with SQL Server containers on Windows. And I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but Microsoft SQL Server division has basically refocused their efforts on to focus on Linux containers going forward. So I don't believe that they've updated Windows SQL Server container images for the past year at this point. So we've got the SQL Server container. We've got the database engine. Both of these are running. If we opened up the services view, you would see they're actually installed and running as Windows services. And we can connect using the normal SSRS config tool. And you can go through, you can modify the report server database, you can access and use the web service URL and the report manager URL. You can do everything you need to here. So I'm just going to log in to show that it does work. And that is your basic demo of delivering a SSRS container, you know, ready to go. This is useful, you know, for, we have clients that are have a full stack SQL Server environment in their application delivery. And so for them, the ability for us to automate the availability of a environment that includes a complex data environment along with a fully functional stack that's delivered in just a matter of seconds is really a, you know, huge benefit for them. You know, you can imagine the difficulty they've had in provisioning these types of environments using VMs. Let's see here. So at this point, Tom, are there any new questions?
No, no new questions at this point.
Okay, cool. So let's go back now to actually build an environment. So I'm out here, I'm on the local host, you know, and I'm working locally. I've actually in the Windocs samples directory, and I've got that Docker file and that cleanse data script. So I'm just going to select these two files. You can see that they've been selected, and we'll call it the virtual image after our virtual group. And a nice thing about the web UI is we have, it's much simpler, obviously, to use. All I've got to do is just select the Docker file and any scripts and give it a name and build, and we will build this new image. Now, in this case, we're restoring the backups. We're building the VHD. We're provisioning a container. The VHD is mounted to the container. And then we're restoring the backups to that VHD and then running that cleanse data script. Now, all of that is going to happen fairly quickly here because these are small backups. If these were large backups, it would take, quite some time to complete, maybe depending on your server throughput, it could take a couple of hours for a large environment. So this would typically be done, in the after hours for large environments, but Windox is a multi-threaded design, so other users could be working in the background here while the system is churning away to build this new image for us. That should be done in another few seconds. Any new questions, Tom?
Yeah, we've got one here. What happens from a report consumer standpoint if the operating system or SQL Server updates need to be applied? Does the container structure allow no downtime patching?
No. Well, yes and no. Once the containers are built, they operate independently of the that parent instance that's being cloned. So I've got here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different containers on the host. They all will continue to operate. And if I need to update the parent image, what I'll do is I'll just start the parent image, the one that was named in the configuration file that we looked at just a minute ago. I'll start that up. I'll apply the patch, and then subsequent containers provisioned from it will have the patch applied. So containers, once they're created, are independent of the source, but you only have one place where you have to go to apply patches and updates. And once those are applied, then you're good to go. All the subsequent containers provisioned from it will have those patches applied. So containers don't automatically inherit updates until the update's applied to the parent. And so now the image has been built. You can see it's available up above. Yeah, you can see it's got the same databases, and we could build a new image or a new container off of it at this point. Optionally, I want to point out that you also can assign ports, and you can also assign SQL passwords when you provision a container. That's a real popular option for developers. It would be common for developers to have, assigned port ranges. Fred might work with ports, 10,100 to 10,110. And that allows Fred to, whether he's working with a Java app or a .NET app, Fred can, know the ports that he wants to use for his connection strings with his application development and testing. So the connection strings will typically include the port and, some SQL SA password.
Another question that's come up, can you use those containers for production?
I wouldn't. For reporting, yes. If you view reporting as a production activity, this is a great way to provide reporting, for example, off of either AWS RDS or SQL Azure, take the backups, build the image, and then use these containers then to support SSRS reporting off of a production environment. So the one place where I think these containers are production worthy today is in the context of SSRS. We don't have SQL agent support at this point. So for more general purpose use of production with the database engine, I would say no. It's really not intended for production use at this point. It's really very good for dev and test, but also reporting now. And when we bring SQL agent online at some point in the future, we'll revisit that. The database engine is nothing, with this design, because we're cloning that installed local instance, the database engine container is nothing more than the source instance, cloned. It's a named instance on the host. So it's production worthy in its own right because we're not modifying it. But without the full complement of SQL services like SQL Agent, first and foremost, I don't see it as really being a viable thing for production use. Other than reporting, I think reporting is a good production use case. Anything else?
Yeah, I've got another question. How do containers address RAM limits of standard edition of 64 gigabytes? Can multiple containers access different 64 gigabyte section to allow larger groups to access the report server without slowdowns?
Well, each container is a clone of the instance, that the containers are being built from. So if it's a standard license, they inherit the attributes of the parent instance, but each is a separate named instance with its own limits. Microsoft's licenses allow for unlimited instances of a licensed, install. So yes, I think that, whereas working with multiple named instances historically have been problematic because, it's very difficult to work with, a rigid set of instances. If you have one instance that faces, a spike of activity, it's difficult to work with that. The containers are much more dynamic and more practical for some of these use cases. So in the case here with SSRS, which can be a compute-intensive process, I do think that it's a good solution, and people, we're in the early stages of proving this out. It's just released last month, but the prospect of being able to spin up multiple SSRS instances in a scale-out fashion to serve, user demands is a good one. And as the workload varies and as the users, complete their tasks, the containers can be cleaned up and free up resources for other work.
Okay, we don't have any other questions at this point.
Cool. Well, I don't think that there's a lot more to be seen here. We've built an image. We've delivered a container. You can see that it was a full-on, SQL Server environment that you can configure with the configuration tool on Access via SQL Server Management Server, or yes, SQL Server Management Studio. We took a look at the configuration options. I would encourage anyone that's interested to, come to the Windocs site, download the free community edition. If there's a more significant project that's involved in your place of work, just let us know. We're happy to provide a full featured server for evaluation as well. I'll just talk briefly here. Let's take a look at one last thing.
All right, and there was one other question comes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ready?
Yeah.
How's the development and deployment of reports and report fixes handled in this environment?
As it normally would be. You can set up whatever the report server database is that you choose and you work with report server just as you normally do. It's just this is a fast, efficient way to deliver a complete report server environment. If you have a lot of users that would benefit from having quick delivery of report server instances, this is the way to do it. Just wanted to wrap up with a brief mention. The product itself is available. We've got versions that start at $200 a month and other versions that are $500 a month, basically, that support terabyte class environments with up to 20 simultaneous containers. So this is a fairly affordable solution for some pretty small and medium-sized teams. We're happy to provide the software for people that have a need to evaluate, larger database environments. So just drop us a note, let us know what you need, and feel free to avail yourselves to the community edition. I would also just encourage people to take a look at containers, because if there's one thing that I think is happening in the marketplace is automation. As you can see here, there's a lot of underlying automation happening. The data environments are going to be automated and delivered. The data environments are going to be delivered to any target environment of your choice in the enterprise. You can imagine that what will happen in the future is we're going to build out a more robust way of exposing a data catalog using this type of an approach with data as a first-class artifact of an image. There's a lot of automation happening, so I would encourage everyone to, get some exposure to this. I think it's a good move to know what's coming. And with that, I want to thank everyone for attending this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you guys. Again, my name is Paul Stanton. You can reach me at pauls@windocs.com. I'm happy always to do this type of presentation and answer any questions to larger groups. So feel free to email me if you have questions later. And, I appreciate the opportunity to present here today. Are there any last questions?
Yeah, there's another one that came in, Paul. Can you create a Power BI container? Because now they have Power BI on-prem. Can you create that?
Yeah. We'll certainly look at that today. Scale out and Power BI are not supported, but if there's interest, well, we're game for everything. So get in touch, let us know what your needs are. We're very customer driven, so our partners and customers dictate our priorities. If Power BI is important, we'll do it.
All right. Well, we want to thank everybody for attending today. This will be put up on YouTube probably by the weekend. I appreciate each of you attending. Don't forget that we're having another presentation next week with David Klee. Basically, it's a question and answer. So bring all your issues you have, and we'll be glad to answer them for you next week. Or you can send them to us in advance. That helps to do some research if we need to. Thanks again, Paul, for coming out. We appreciate it. And you guys all have a great day.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.